Welcome back to Embracing New Life, where we explore the intersections of mental health, resources, and Christianity, and those who stand in the gap. And on today's podcast, and for the next 4 episodes, we'll be diving into an interview that we had with AJ Schreier, who's a colleague of ours at New Life Resources. He's going to be diving into his work on addiction and how he got into that and his background coming into the profession. But we hope you are enjoying these episodes as we introduce you to the staff at New Life Resources. Stay tuned because we'll have more of them after this. But onward now to our episode, part 1 of 4 with AJ Schreier in Embracing New Life. Welcome back to Embracing New Life, and on today's episode we have another one of our colleagues, AJ Schreier. He's an addiction specialist who's been working at the clinic for, how many years have you been here at New Life?
Oh, that's always going to be 8, 9.
At least.
Yeah.
Yes.
So closing in on a decade.
Yeah.
Closing in on a decade of time here at New Life Resources, and we're sitting down to have a discussion with him today. So welcome, AJ.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to have you.
It's good to have you. I remember meeting you when you were in a student role.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if we're getting started here. If you could just share a little bit with us, how did you get into this area of addiction counseling?
I always tell my story is not the most captivating, entertaining as to, in addiction work, you hear a lot of testimonials. People tell their stories about, their experience. And for me, it wasn't my experience with substances that got me into it. It wasn't, mental health that brought me into counseling. It was going to counseling at a young age that brought me into all the work that I do. So I tell people that I'm a little bit different than what is kind of seen as the norm, as I become sort of my experience in those areas isn't what brought me into counseling. It was counseling that got me into everything that I do now.
And your college years, you were exploring a little bit about counseling and psychology and such. What areas did you find interesting at that point in life?
So early on, people are surprised to find this, that I almost didn't pass high school. I almost failed high school. I was not doing really well, and things started changing around. And when I went to a counselor, and that changed a lot of things for me. And then when I wanted to go to school, I was looking at I want to do counseling, but my grades weren't the best. I started doing really well, I think my last semester at senior year. So it was kind of where it didn't matter with colleges. So I was looking at local colleges and found Waukesha County Technical College had a program where you could start doing counseling. And I was looking at the curriculum they had online, and I saw year 2, you could start doing your practicum. So if I could do 1 year of college and do well in classes, I could start counseling already my second year. But the program was in substance use. And that's really what brought my interest. Was this is something counseling I wanted to get into. This is the fastest I could get into it and start doing it. But I didn't know anything about substance use. I didn't have any of the background with the lived experience. So a lot of it then just came from the academics, reading the textbooks and learning about everything that there was from a historical part of it to the theories and how to work with those with substance use. But it was really diving right into academics, and then second year at 19 years old, doing counseling with 12-year-old, 17-year-old kids.
And did you find a good fit?
Yeah, it was. I loved starting working with kids. It was interesting because two interesting things about that was I was so young. I was 19. Some of them were 16 years old, 17. So I think it worked a little bit because I was younger.
Yeah.
I could connect with. I wasn't this older counselor coming in. I think it built a little better bit of a connection. The challenging part was when you work with kids, you also work with their parents.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So sometimes I had parents who were then questioning like what I could do as a counselor when I was only 19, 20 years old. So that was where, and couple that with the not having the lived experience, it was challenging not working with people directly, but sometimes the expectation that I would have had lived experience and that I should have been older did have people questioning whether or not I could be an effective counselor.
Well, I know you've been a very effective counselor, so you're meeting those challenges as a teenager, early 20s. You've had a lot of education since that first program at WCTC.
Yeah, it was, and it was the amazing thing about coming here to New Life. And I remember when we first met and started talking that I spent, as a counselor, I focused like 8 or 9 years solely on substance use. So that became, everything that I worked with, everything that I read about, everything that I went to trainings for was all directed at substance use. And that was a lot of good years of focusing on like one aspect of, counseling, treatment, diagnosing and all that. And then when I came here and actually started looking at mental health and other things not even related to substance use, I was definitely more of a fish out of water. I was looking at this entirely different because I spent so many years really dedicated to learning. And because, when you think about it, why was that? Because I didn't have a lot when I started. So to me, it was going out and collecting and discovering, gathering, learning as much as I could to feel like I could belong. Then realizing I didn't know much about all the other areas, mental health, families, relationships, all those other things that we talk about in the work that we do was entirely new to me because my tunnel vision was the substance use and how do I help that.
Well, you did learn to swim real quickly. And, a question that I think many people will ask is, well, how is a addiction counselor or substance abuse counselor and a mental health counselor, how are they different?
Yeah, part of it's the whole how we've made it that way. There's part of it is if you want to go get substance use, you have to go get certain training for that. There's a whole separate license for it that there was going on. If you want to do mental, like there was a lot of siloing.
Yes, there has been in the history.
Yeah, and that I think sometimes clinicians had to choose. And I mean, you're not even a clinician at the time, but as a student, you kind of had to choose which one do I want to help first, which one do I want to go work with. But there wasn't really anything that could be like, you know what, I want to do it all. So like, put me on that path. For me, it was started with substance use because that's the one I found a program that I could get into right away.
Yeah.
And then I got into mental health because I realized there's more than going on than substance use. This is not just a stop using and everything is then good to go. There's more going on. Then you work with families, you work with marriages, you work with different populations. So I think part of the unfortunate thing is when you're a young student, like sometimes you have to choose, like, where do I want to start working versus like, hey, I'd like to just be in an office and have whoever comes in. I'd like to be able to start working with them. But because of that, when you get set on a course that has different trainings, different historical pieces of how it's viewed, with different ways people have tried to treat it or address it, then you do get introduced to ways as to why substance use is viewed differently versus why the mental health is. Like, some people are like, well, what came first? And I, it's like that chicken and egg.
Sure.
My response has always been like, something's hatched. Like we got both going on. So like, I'm gonna help address both. But sometimes there is that little bit of disagreement between different areas of, even though they're all part of counseling, part of treatment, a part of, you can find them all in the DSM-5 to diagnose people, but there is still somewhat of some pretty thick bookmarks, I would say, dividing some of those sections.
Yes, and you've been able to bridge some of those divisions and bring it together in your work.
Yeah, it took me a little bit of time to think of it. Early on, a lot of imposter syndrome on belonging in the profession, because most of the time when I started, people would always ask me like, "Oh, well, do you have lived experience? Do you have this as well?" And I'd try and find ways to kind of brush it off because I didn't feel super comfortable with it. And then more so now, no one asks. Like, people sit with me for sessions, and we talk and we go through things, and those questions don't get asked anymore. I think, I don't know what that is, but I just think it's either me more comfortable with how I'm doing it. But part of it is, I think I've brought some disruption to how sometimes things have been traditionally viewed, because I didn't come with that like bias of this is what I use or this is what got me better, that I now think this is like the way, or this is what's going to work for everyone. I think, looking back on how long I've been doing this, what I used to think was a flaw or a limit of mine is now more of a strength.
I agree.
That I come in with, I don't have a way that it worked for me. It's not about that. It's really about trying to meet you where you're at.
Yes.
And how do I help you? And that's not always the most agreed method. I mean, some people want to say like, hey, if you do this program and you work this way and you do that, this is going to be
success,
a guaranteed way. This is going to be a success. For me, success isn't trying to change someone. It's not trying to get them to be in a certain place. I don't even look at success as like what I necessarily do. I think success is like who I am when I show up every day for that person. Non-judgmental, checking my biases at the door, creating that safe space for whatever you're dealing with, that you can come talk to me, and that judging or that disappointment's not going to speak from either my words or my nonverbals. So I like disrupting now. I think
you're a disruptor.
Yeah, I use it more as this is to change, because I think we all have to look at, we have to see where things have been done wrong. Or things, what we thought we knew before isn't exactly what we are aware of now. There's things like even how we talk about people, or how the language that we use is something that I cover a lot, where this used to be okay, or we used to think this was normal, but now we have to change. Like that's not okay. That's stigmatizing. That's harmful. But being able to recognize that, and it's opportunity for growth. I think,
definitely.
Yes.
I worry. When I do clinical supervision, and I'm working with counselors, I worry when a counselor thinks like they've got this. We talk about clients when they say they've got this, but also like we have to worry about professionals who think like I've got this, or I don't need anything else to learn. Like, oh, I've gone through that. Like, to me, one thing I love about this profession is you can always continue to learn.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And there's some that struggle to do that, but for me, it's I don't think I've run out of books to watch, people to talk to, like things to listen to, and it's. But then I change from that. My approach becomes different. I say how I was as a counselor at 19 is vastly different than now when I'm 40. Because I'm not the same counselor, and I'm grateful for that.
You're still the disruptor.
I am, yeah. More so, yeah.
That's a good thing. Yeah, we get tunnel vision so quickly that it's good to force yourself to see things from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So if I were to see your name in a professional setting, you have a lot of letters behind your name.
Yeah, it's part of the whole, you have to do, keep getting more stuff.
Can you share with us some of the areas of study, some your degrees, your license, etc.? Yeah.
So let's go with education, because I'm always grateful for the education I've gotten, because I took it for granted in high school, but I loved my schooling where, I went and I got an associate's degree in substance use, and that was got me in the door. And then when I was going back for my bachelor's degree, I decided to get it in psychology and human services. So it was more of understanding the human services and the dynamics and systems, and psychology was so much about like what was going on up in here. And then when I wanted to get more into mental health is when I went for my master's degree in counseling. So I do like that I kind of, in my education, did a little bit of a menu of different areas. I didn't just say only this, but it was dive into the human services aspects, psychology, counseling, and then my alcohol and drugs background really got me into it with the start. And then that led to, of course, if I wanted to work with more people, I had to get more licenses, because when I only have substance use, that's the only one I could work with. So then I went for my LPC, licensed professional counselor, and that got me more into like the mental health, and got more into, working in. I started seeing more families, more couples, relationships. That dynamic is a whole nother one you could talk about, which is amazing. And then this sounds really weird for being like a person in their 40s, but I did realize like there was going to be a time where I wasn't going to do all the counseling that is happening now. Like as I continue my career, there's going to be a point where like I'm no longer doing this. And that got me to want to do clinical supervision, which was wanting to work with other counselors who are going to be in my spot or in the area that we're doing when I'm gone. So I started to want to work with counselors and help them work with their licensures. And it's been, over the years, it's been a lot of different counselors that I've, given supervision hours for, signed off for their licenses. And that was a really good point in realizing like that's what I wanted to make sure I also left behind when it comes time to no longer do this. Now I think I could be doing this till I'm like 80, but just the idea that I wouldn't be here forever. And there's two other certifications I want to talk about because it doesn't get addressed enough. Is that I also became interested in gambling. And as a result, I received my International Certified Gambling, and I do clinical consultation for gambling as well, because that was an area that became very interesting to me. So those two certifications people don't notice those as much as the licenses, but they are things that I wanted to go for to highlight the need to help those impacted by gambling.
And if we could just take a look at that for just a moment, because gambling, we just got done with March Madness here. With, sports gambling has become so normative. And most people report that they always win more than they lose. When is gambling a problem?
Yeah, I like talking about gambling stuff because it's so I call it hidden in plain sight, because it's there, we see it, we don't deny it. It's very big in culture nowadays. It's even you see it in advertisements, commercials, you see it all over the place, but it's not as easy to see when someone's having a problem with gambling. In other areas there can be sometimes more clues about it, right? Someone who's really intoxicated and shows up to work, like if you're showing up to work and you can smell alcohol on you, or it looked like you were out the night before and you aren't looking the best, like right away that could signal to us like, okay, maybe there's an issue here, maybe there's a problem. To the extent we don't know, but that at least is like a sign that maybe something is going on here. You can't tell if someone just came into work and lost a significant sum of money, or if they all of a sudden don't have the amount of money to pay for rent or pay for, or they just lost all their savings account for the family. There's no telltale signs. You could be participating in gambling and not know the person next to you just, lost such a huge sum, or they lost an amount of money that is impacting them. When it comes down to the question of when it's a problem, I tell people, and I do this in my trainings, that don't get caught in the money factor. When people hear about losing money, people get sort of taken back by it. So if I tell you, hey, this person lost $10,000 last night gambling, people might do the whole like, whoa, their eyes get really big, or they, like they make those comments. But $10,000 doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem, because we don't know what 10,000 means to that person.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we also don't want to go the opposite, where someone goes, oh, they only lost $50. Like, to someone that's no big deal, but to someone else, $50 could be like a really big deal.
Most
Yes.
definitely, yes. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Embracing New Life and part 1 of our interview with AJ Schreier. Make sure to tune in next week for part 2, and as we continue the conversation with him, and then parts 3 and 4, and then a full episode Friday that will be released after part 4 goes live. And so hope you're enjoying these. Take care and see you next week. Embracing New Life is a production of New Life Resources, a Christian counseling clinic in Southeast Wisconsin, whose aim and goal since 1976 has been to provide high-quality professional counseling, psychological, and consulting services from within a Christian framework.